Hey there, I'm Heather Creekmore. Thanks for listening to the Compare to podcast today. Today, I'm so excited for this conversation. I know I say that a lot, but I am here with my friends, Erin Todd. You know her from Intuitive Eating for Christian Women, and Ashley Smith, who was on the show. Oh, I'll look up the episode numbers. It'll be in the show notes. But she was on the show, I don't know, year and a half or so, and she is from the HA Society. And if you have no idea what, I mean, that sounds fancy, just like point blank, that just sounds fancy. HA stands for hypothalamic amenorrhea. And if you have no idea what that is, that's totally cool because we're going to go there today. You're going to learn about that. But today, from the title, you probably understood that we're going to talk about pregnancy and what Ashley does to help women get pregnant after a long history of disordered eating, eating disorders, over controlling food, over exercising, all of those things that the three of us on this call have experienced. But then this is going to be the super fun part. Then you are going to hear from Erin, who has been on the show forever, about her journey. And
Mhm.
Erin actually just had a baby last June, and he's sweet as can be. And so you're going to hear how Ashley worked with Erin to help her get pregnant naturally. So it is so much fun. So even if you're not in the market to have a baby, you're still going to want to stick around to hear Erin's story and just the hope and insight that is there. So, Ashley and Erin, thanks for being on the show.
Excited to be here, Heather.
Yeah. I mean, what a great group of women to be hanging out with this morning. So I'm
Yay.
excited.
Yay. Okay, here's where I want to start. Ashley,
Yes.
take us through just like the Cliff Notes version. What do you do? Your story you told in detail on the show before, but I think so. Like I've shared in my book that I lost my period for about 9 months my sophomore year of college. So I would have been about 18, 19 years old. And everyone told me it was stress, which there's probably a stress component to it, but my eating was pretty messed up. And I
Hmm.
think that this is a common story. It's one that I get emails on all the time. I mean, people are asking me, how'd you get your period back? I'm like, I don't,
Hmm.
for some reason, mine just came back, but that's not that way for everyone. And that's what you do. So tell us a little bit about that and explain what hypothalamic amenorrhea is.
Yes. Okay. Cliff notes. Here we go. So, hypothalamic amenorrhea is when your body is in such an energy deficit that your brain and your ovaries stop communicating, right? Because our body, hello, was created and designed so like just intentionally that when you go through a season of under eating and over exercising to where it becomes a chronic caloric deficit, your body is like, hey, I don't have enough resources to get pregnant, so I'm going to shut off ovulation. And what that means is that your hypothalamus, pituitary, and ovaries stop communicating. So whether you want to have kids or not, which I didn't in the beginning, so I was like, I don't care, moving on with my life. Was that you will, I promise, start to care about a lack of hormones, low hormones, hormonal imbalance. This goes for everything from your teeth to your bones. A lot of my clients have osteoporosis at the age of 30, just things that they're like, I never thought that this was actually going to be possible. They always warned me about it, but it never was really real. And then even then, we think that we can out exercise osteoporosis, or the other types of things that women will see will be elevated cholesterol. Right. So then they start eating more low fat. But if you don't have estrogen, your cholesterol is always going to climb. And so we think that we can out exercise just these imbalances that are created from not ovulating. So whether you want to get pregnant or not, if you are a female who would like to not go through menopause at the age of like wherever you're at, 25, 26, 29, you know what I mean? Then hormones are really important.
Yeah.
And for females, we only make them through the process of ovulation. So kind of back to our, unique design is that if we don't have enough energy to breastfeed, if we don't have enough energy to carry out a pregnancy, then our body is not going to allow us to ovulate, which would then put us at risk of doing something that we just don't have the caloric energy to do. Now, where this, I feel like this ties in is that I didn't have technically an eating disorder, but I actually don't know what woman doesn't have disordered eating living in 2025 or wherever, you know what I mean? So what's really interesting and something that I'm really passionate about is that you don't have to have an eating disorder in order to develop hypothalamic amenorrhea. You just have to be dieting long enough and over exercising long enough, either one or the other or both together. And then that's where this conversation now reaches almost every single woman.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's really, I help women in that area, restore ovulation naturally, and then get pregnant if that's what they want to do, or if they do want to return to exercise, but in a way that's through the filter of, am I ovulating? How's my cycle? Where the sign of health is not your body composition, but is like, are all functions running? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of what I do.
I mean, that should probably be said again and louder. The sign of health is not your body composition. It's our all functions running. So, like, just a little side note here. When you hear a woman that's told she's in perimenopause at 30 or 35, like, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I'm always like, okay, show me, because I never want to discount somebody, because that's the worst when you know, like when you go to a doctor and they just don't listen.
Right.
So I want to make sure that I'm never guilty of the same thing. But instead, I think I'm filled with a lot of hope for them, because I'm like, girl, this is strongly likely not the case. But first, show me your labs. Do you have labs that reflect this? Or do you likely have labs that reflect hypothalamic amenorrhea? And so here's the other thing, is that you could be on the spectrum of hypothalamic amenorrhea. Like technically hypothalamic amenorrhea is when you have lost your cycle after you've been like cycling, like you've already hit puberty, you've lost your cycle for 3 or more months consecutively. And so while perimenopause is like this tricky because your hormones are coming in and out, in and out, in and out, if you get labs consistently enough, you will see that wild fluctuation, and then we can have a different conversation. But if your hormones are repeatedly tanked, this is not perimenopause, you know what I mean? And thankfully, hypothalamic amenorrhea, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at labs and find it. It's all over PubMed. It's not hidden. It's just not well known. If that makes sense. And so that's really encouraging to me when they're asking those questions. And I love that they're asking those questions, because my gosh, you may have 20 more years of ovulating. I don't think that you want to go into menopause 20 years early. I just don't know if we are comprehending what state that puts our brain in, what state that puts our arteries in our bones. Like, that's 20 additional years that you're not going to get back. You know what I mean? And thankfully, like, women survive. I mean, I'm not trying to make menopause like it's something that you can't survive, but I truly believe that how you prepare your body going into that season truly matters. And that's the difference of like a really tough, like my mom had a really tough experience, but she also dieted her entire life.
Yeah,
You know
mine
what I mean?
too. Yep.
Yeah, and
Same.
now,
Same.
you know, and she lived a very high stress life. And I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, Lord, anything but that. Like, that looks really, and then plus she just, at her age, I mean, unfortunately, nobody was ever talking so openly about menopause. And so she just went into it just not even knowing how to advocate for herself. So there's the physical side, then there's that side. Long story short, you want to spend those 20 years like ovulating, you know, yes, osteoporosis can be reversed. We have seen women's bones start to heal after they start to ovulate. Look here, I'm not going into menopause already with osteoporosis, osteopenia, or on the verge. Like, I got too much to do, Lord willing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I got too much traveling to be. No, 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 no.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I turned 50 this year. And so I'm in it, right? I'm in perimenopause. And even I didn't really notice it until I would say maybe 2 years ago with
Mhm.
sleep and hot flashes and those kind of things, right? And realizing, I mean, I've got some topical like compounded estrogen that I'm on now
Yeah,
and progesterone
yeah,
and stuff and like life changing, right?
yes.
But as I'm talking to people who are much younger than me, who are
Mhm.
told that they're there. And,
Yeah.
and then we're also told in perimenopause that the way to save ourselves from perimenopause is to diet more, right? I mean, that's diet and exercise more. And so watching women diet and exercise more and more and reduce their calories more and more and, reduce certain macros more and more.
Mhm.
And it's like, and then the symptoms don't necessarily get better. It's just like this frustrating cycle. So I just appreciate you shedding some light on that.
Yeah, well, think about this. You're never going to diet out of a hormonal imbalance, like in terms of perimenopause. Like, so here's the other thing. Like, yeah, yeah. It's just like these things are, oh, that's my dog. He
Special guest.
special guest guys. It's just one of those things where it's like, especially when it's not perimenopause.
Mhm.
So like you wind up creating, like, you're already in a hole, and unfortunately you're digging such a bigger hole. And like we see this with PCOS too, with women who are misdiagnosed with PCOS, which is also very easy to find in labs. It's
Mhm.
all over PubMed as well, so it's not a secret. But they wind up digging themselves in a deeper hole because that is the PCOS protocol,
Mhm.
right? And so it's really, really, really interesting. Like, yeah, I think like we want it to be a diet thing because we want to gain control. We're like, this is an uncontrollable situation. I'm going to regain control
Mhm.
by reducing this. But most of the times, it really is letting go of control. It's so interesting. Like, letting go of control is actually gives you the control that you're craving,
Mhm.
right? Like whenever like we let go of making cookies, like the or sugar, the worst thing in the
Mhm.
world, once you let go, like control of that, like you actually find that I don't binge eat, I'm not obsessed with
Mhm.
it. And then all of a sudden you're walking in this quote unquote control, which really is just freedom.
Mhm.
Hello. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? But like letting go of that control is when you actually find the control that you are desiring. But like we just keep going, like we just keep going
Yeah.
the opposite way and trying to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's spot on. And so, I mean, this kind of ties back to age, perimenopause, and control all in one. And we have Erin,
Yes.
who at 40 is like, maybe I want to have a baby. And Erin, why don't you just share a little bit about your journey with those things?
I'd love to. Okay, so it's just so fun to be here because Heather, you're the one that suggested that I connect with
I was
Ashley.
thinking that, but I didn't want to take credit. But I was like, did
You
I?
you definitely get credit for that. It's
Okay.
amazing to have such a full circle moment of being here with you both. Because when you had her on your podcast the first time, it must have been right around when I was starting to try on my own. And so you guys both walked with me the whole way and connected me. Heather, it took a couple of months before I actually called Ashley up, but I did in true Erin fashion. I had to give it my own shot and DIY for a while. And then I realized, hey, I'm getting a late start to this party. Why am I trying to do this myself? Why would I not get help? Like, why do I want this to take longer? And it was so humbling to finally get some professional help and some coaching, because I didn't do that with my food journey. That was just me and God walking it out. And he's very patient, but it took a long time. So I'm like, I'm going to take some shortcuts here and get some help and not keep spinning my wheels on the same things that I would have been. Ashley knows I would have been doing the same things I was doing, and I would have been getting the same results I was getting. So I really needed some outside objective eyes and some knowledge to just kind of school me, because I thought I was good with food, but I needed help. I thought I was good with just my attitude about it, but I needed to surrender again.
Yeah. Hey, so let me pause you there, Erin. I want you to go on, but I just want to kind of bring that out, and maybe we add some color to that, right? You thought you were good with food. You are hosting the Intuitive Eating for Christian Women podcast.
Yes.
You are teaching women about intuitive eating. You
That's right.
have been on your journey from dieting and restriction and all the things to intuitive eating. And yet you still hadn't arrived, right? Because none of us actually arrived. The punchline
Exactly.
there. But like, can you fill that? Give just a little bit more color to that.
Sure. So I think what I realized was I had gotten into a routine with how I was eating. And food was thankfully not something I was thinking about all the time anymore. I was kind of just doing it, and it was just happening and not getting a lot of mental bandwidth, which was, one of my favorite things about intuitive eating is I just don't have to stress or even think about this stuff. It just happens. The food is on my table and I'm eating it. And what we learned with Ashley's help and making me do food logs and stuff like that, which I was like, oh, do I really need to do this? And it was like, yes, because I wasn't being very thoughtful because I wasn't thinking about it, and I wasn't being intentional around the areas where I needed to be intentional to make change. I was just wanting to go through it without having to think about it. Thinking about it was, oh my goodness, I think a lot of us can relate to the fatigue, the mental fatigue of just constantly having the food dialogue running in your head of what's coming next. What did I just do? What does this mean? And just that calculus that you're always doing. And so when you finally get silence up there where that has been, you don't want to put that back. I really resisted having to think about it, but being curious and compassionate and intentional about food again was really a challenge. But it was possible, and it didn't push me back into the overthinking and the obsessing. It was just intentionality.
So intentionality, and Ashley, I want you to jump in here. Like what is the balance? Like, how do you help people who come from a disordered eating background? She's making all kinds of faces. But it's like the balance between, okay, no, legitimately, there's like macros, and like you need certain amounts of these if you have, certain health things going on. And I feel like I'm back on a diet.
Yes. Oh, I would love that you bring this up because
Ashley's coming to us from the zoo.
I have a zoo. I have an urban zoo.
A cat just walked by.
And mind you, they have the whole house to themselves. My toddler would be in here too if she could.
Love it. Love it.
Oh my gosh. So I love this question because honestly, it's so valid and it's so real. And when Erin and I first started, there wasn't anything for her to like, she didn't have these. It wasn't like she was fooling herself and she was living in restriction and all these things, like that's not what was going on. I think it was just one of those things of like, yeah, but to optimize at 40, we probably just need to push this a little bit more. And I feel like that feels so heavy whenever you've come from a place of bondage with food.
Mm-hmm.
So then I think sometimes there's this rewriting of what intentionality is because we may not have always been able to walk that line of intentionality without it just diving over into dieting and restricting because like we just don't have a lot of experience with that. Does that make sense to where it's like feels like a gray area, but maybe only because we just don't want to go back to that bondage. And so anything that resembles it, anything that looks like it, anything that maybe even slightly feels like it, even to where it could be even triggering to be like, oh, a food log, you know what I mean? To where that's a genuine trigger. I hear that. I hear that. And then it's learning, but like, I need to see it so I can help provide you feedback just so I'm not shooting in the dark. And so now we're going to revisit this habit, but it's not for the same purpose. And now we have to walk that out. Right. Like, I think that that's really like what it is. It's like having to revisit possible similar habits that we have previously used to control our body and be like, oh no, but now I'm using it to nourish. Like, I had the same resistance to meal prepping because I associated meal prepping with just dieting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so I feel like where it's this, and then you like one of the things, and so I feel like intuitive eating means that you're on a journey of constantly being open to learning about yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's this constant journey. Like, I remember I was like 3 years recovered and I had orange juice and it felt like I was like, oh my gosh, when was the last time I had an orange juice? Had I been unknowingly avoiding juices, even though I've got my period back. I've done the work with like my body image and getting back into movement. I've had a baby. I've been postpartum. I'm fine on the other side. We're sitting here at a donut place. But yeah, and then like I had a cup of fresh squeezed orange juice and it hit me that I can't recall the last time I've had juice.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I was avoiding it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when it comes on that intuitive eating journey, it's like I am open to realizing, oh, I may have unknowingly kept a habit.
Yeah.
Not because I was trying to diet, but it's just kind of lingering, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I feel like that's how I have to frame it when I take women who have had a history like that. And yet I have to ask them to do something like, hey, I just need a food view. I just need to see pictures. I just need to see what's going on. Mind you, and then the other thing that we ask women to do is to track their basal body temperature. And anybody who's had a history with the scale, they'll be like, they'll leave the scale. They're like, I have burned my scale. Good, check. But then we transfer that same mindset from the scale to temping. And now my temperature that morning means something about me and means something. And so again, it's having to ask them to walk this line, but then in that process, hopefully revealing we are going to do this, but for a different reason. And it's going to feel uncomfortable in the process. But I promise you, this is for a season, and then you go back to not needing a food view. This is for a season, and maybe we do something, you know what I mean? And then being able to use habits as a season instead of a lifestyle or quote unquote part of your discipline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, it's like willing to get in the mess with some people and be like, I promise you, we're not going in that direction. I promise you there's a different purpose for it. And I promise you it's like, this is temporary.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Okay. And aside on the juice thing, I read a study like literally last week, and I know you love studies too. I read a study that said people that drink like an 8-ounce glass of juice every day actually have better blood sugar regulation than people who don't. And I was thinking, and they have a less likelihood of diabetes. And I'm like, oh my word. Like, how long have I like, oh, I can't drink juice anymore because all that sugar, just a straight shot to the diabetes wagon if you drink juice.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, that's not it.
Or even like all the things where they're like, you would never drink that much juice ever.
Eat that many oranges. Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, maybe you're right, but maybe because I'm lazy, not because it's possibly not available.
Yeah.
Anyways, but no, I had a drink of that juice.
Yeah.
that juice and I was like, wow, I feel
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, but I mean, I think the core of what you're saying, right? And then so back to you, Erin, right? Is you like legit were like, I'm intuitive eating. And then you're like, oh, no, I'm kind of in routine. Can you fill
Absolutely.
that out?
Yeah. The thing that actually broke me over, and this was, this was the uncomfortable, what you just described, it's uncomfortable for a season, was adding protein to breakfast, because my breakfast, out of habit, because this is what I've always had, is fruit and toast and coffee. Like, and she's like, yeah, but you're gonna need some protein in the morning to support, for all of her reasons, footnote, side note, like all the different studies of this is why you need protein. But I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I do.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, but you need it. Your
Yeah.
body needs this to support, getting my cycle where we wanted it to be and all the things. And so I had to break that habit of like, but this is how I do things,
Mhm.
and intentionally go, okay, well, I'm going to choose to include something here that's going to support my body and give it some additional nourishment. And that doesn't mean I'm eating something that I don't want to eat. That doesn't mean I'm not honoring hunger and fullness. All the other things are still in play. And I think where we had to leave it on the first time, when she really insisted I do this, was like, okay, I'll try it. Like, let
Mhm.
me just try it and see what happens. If I don't like adding protein to breakfast, we can always, figure something else out. I can always come back to her and say, oh, I didn't like your idea and I didn't want to do it. And it's like, okay, let me just try it. Let me just
Yeah.
be present in my day instead of just going on autopilot and doing what I always do. I have to think about things, and try something different. Otherwise, I'm going to get the same result. And so I think you've quoted that as the definition of insanity many times, Heather. And I think a lot of us want to just keep doing what we're doing and get a different result. And I was so there. It's like,
Yeah.
Lord, just sat me pregnant. I don't want to make any changes with food.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
do anything.
What I also hear, and then I'll let you go on, Erin, but I also hear that Ashley, in her compassion and wisdom, she didn't have you restrict anything, right? She didn't say, no, Erin, your breakfast is wrong. No more toast, no more fruit. It's only scrambled eggs and maybe a little bit of bacon, right? She was like, no, eat your toast and fruit and, give me some protein, which, we've talked about on the show a number of times, but like that addition mindset,
Yeah.
so much easier, so much healthier, so much less stressful than you have to make a complete swap of this beloved meal.
Yes, 100%. What can I add
Yeah.
in
Okay.
terms of variety and just support? Like that is a positive approach. What can I add?
So you start adding protein to breakfast. And then what happens? Like, carry on.
Well, we got some good cycling results pretty quickly after that. I'd say my body responded really well. It took a couple of cycles through to sort of learn what was going on with all of my, and I'm going to go ahead and blame mom brain for this. I forgot all the name of the phases already, Ashley. So you can chime in with what, what phase was weird that we were seeing results in as we were adding protein. And just, it was really cool to just watch my body kind of respond to that. And, it just went on from there. I was getting a little bit stressed that summer. We were working together. Life was just crazy. And so it was kind of stalling out a little bit, although I could see my body responding, and we kind of came to a big emotional, mental health head, and we had to get to another big surrender moment before we got through to the actual conception part. But the work with food on the front end and the challenging of how I was thinking about it, and just my whole approach to how I was treating my body and what I was expecting it to do, and on my timeline, and all of the type A dieting mindset stuff creeps back so much. I couldn't help but notice how that was popping up for me again. It was kind of like I was having to revisit food. I was having to revisit mindset stuff again too. It's like,
Yeah.
look how attached I am to this outcome. How is this different than being attached to a number on the scale? And boy, did I try and do that with the basal body temperature stuff in the morning. It's like my brain grooves are so deep there. You have to really think about not getting stuck there and talk yourself out of that. Or be blessed enough to have a coach to help talk you out of that, or a friend to help talk you out of that. It's so easy to slip back into that. But eventually we did get pregnant, and, you know, I had a 1% chance, according to the fertility doctor.
Yeah, let's go there, Erin. I mean, so you're 40, you're going to the doctor, and did you tell them that you were going to try Ashley's Hocus Pocus? I mean, I think that's how they would cash it out. All right. Did you tell them that, or what did that look like?
So I had already been with Ashley a couple of meetings before that appointment with the fertility doctor. So I was very educated. She gave me questions to ask. I knew I was coming in there armed with some cycle charts to wave in her face and see what she had to say about it. She was not interested. But ultimately, you know, the point of going to the fertility doctor was just to get the check to make sure, you know, everything's okay organ wise. Like, there's nothing wrong with you or your husband. There's no barrier to a natural conception. And she couldn't point to anything other than my age. I was like, well, there's nothing wrong. You got a clean bill of health. We don't know, you know, I think I was 41 actually. And so it's like, yeah, it's just, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you're AMA at 35, right?
Right.
Because I had a baby at 35 and then another one at 37. And so, yes, I heard all the time about my geriatric pregnancy. But Ashley, okay. So like, I mean, I want to be clear here, right? Like, not everyone's going to get pregnant just by adding more protein, right? And you know, there are some challenges from, you know, every side. I mean, it might not even be you, it might be him, right? But can you give us some hope for the woman who maybe is like, my only last option is IVF? Like, what is that always true?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because AMH is a tricky one. And I say tricky because and like we spent some time chatting about this. AMH needs to be measured. So first off, like I could rattle off a million studies about AMH. And with that being said, is that you actually can't test it one time and then use that as a marker of like fertility. One, it changes drastically throughout your cycle. It changes based on your ethnicity. So we're already taking a few things, you know what I mean? And it is really used in the fertility world of IVF. They use that as their marker because they're not going to improve anything holistically before they put you down that path. Does that make sense? Where AMH is a reflection of your like follicles, right? Like the pool of follicles. And so what we see with HA specifically is that when it's turned off, no, I do not expect AMH to be great. It's going to be in the toilet. Like, it's like, hello, there's no estrogen getting to it. There's no gonadotropin, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing nourishing, nurturing, facilitating. That whole system is shut down. So with AMH, you know, with that too, and so that's why I think, unfortunately, when it comes to a natural pregnancy, AMH is also used, although natural pregnancies and IVF are not the same. They're legit not the same, right? And so really and truly, we want to be careful on what measures we're using for what we're actually doing, right? And what is the conditions on why our labs are the way that they are, right? So I think that that's something really important. And I think just because I've had clients where their AMH was practically dust and she got pregnant fine. You know what I mean? She did come from an eating disorder background, right? So she actually had primary amenorrhea due to hypothalamic amenorrhea. So this means that somebody never started their cycle due to dieting in their teens and stuff like that, right? And so of course their AMH was so low that the doctor was like, you need to get in next week and we need to start the process and we need to freeze your eggs because you're not gonna be able to, you're never going to be able to get pregnant by yourself. Well, once she worked through her eating disorder and then worked on restoring ovulation, she got pregnant just fine. So my whole advice of is IVF the only option is I think that we need to pause and take a look and see where are you at and what is actually causing the infertility struggles. Like I feel like we need to ask a lot of those questions first, then like just assuming that like IVF is the best option, because unfortunately what we see is that even women with HA, they don't respond well to IVF as well. So then unfortunately we get a lot of women who have spent a lot of money, time, emotional energy, just things that you're really not getting back. And then they are able to get pregnant with us, but it's because we address what was the underlying issue. And I think that is so important.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I was gonna break us for the next episode, but I'm like, oh well, we're not gonna break. I'm too late. So we're gonna just keep going. There's a food side, right? There's a legit like macronutrient side, right? But we all know that underneath eating disorders, there's often control issues. There's often stress because we're not only stressed about body size, weight, appearance, all those things, we're also stressed about food. And I mean, my story is I would go to bed every night, like cataloging like what I did wrong in terms of food and what I did wrong in terms of exercise, or maybe like patting myself on the back because I didn't eat any sugar all day or whatever the diet du jour was. But there was stress around that, right? And so, Erin, you weren't necessarily in that kind of stress, but life threw you a literal hurricane. And there was other kind of stress, correct?
Yeah. I was having just a very hectic season of life with a lot of just external stress that I couldn't do anything about. And actually, we got to a point towards the end of the summer where I had to tell Ashley, I was like, I can't continue putting in work on it because we've identified all the ways stress is impacting this. Like we know that's at play, but I can't change it. I'm just surviving it. And so like I actually needed to take a break from the work. I'm like, I need to put this down for a minute because I've got other fires to put out and like I just need a breather. And as soon as that happened with the just August of whatever that year was, I'm losing years already, ladies. I lost my French bulldog, who is my fur baby. He passed away, and then 2 weeks after that, we got flooded. Our home got flooded in a hurricane, and so it was just this big upheaval, just trauma. I would call that. I've experienced that as a big T trauma for me personally, which I hadn't really experienced before. And so that was the stress culminating and coming to a head in an actual big experience. But with that came, I think that was almost like a forced surrender. I was doing my daily practice of just having to constantly put it down again, give it back to God, and really trying to come in agreement with, if this is your will, we'll get pregnant, and if it's not, I won't like it, but I'll accept it, and your way is always better. But the providential timing of after that trauma, the next cycle is when we conceived. And so I can't help but reflect on that now and just think, wow, Lord, you knew what was coming. And we got pregnant right on time. Had I been pregnant before that trauma, I may not have continued to be pregnant. I mean, just the thought, when I think on that, I can't help but well up with tears a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and Ashley, you do a sweet job. I mean, you've got a biblical counseling background. You do a sweet job of combining okay, like let's talk straight talk about like the facts around like this nutrition thing and this physical thing, but then also like let's dig in, my friend. What's going on with you?
Yes.
Right? So what do you see there?
Oh,
what is that?
it was so good because I think the Lord has with like Erin, like we even have to surrender our timelines.
Mhm.
Every healing journey, we have to
Mhm.
surrender this timeline. And whether you're 40, you're 26, whether you want to get pregnant, whether you don't want to get pregnant, the Lord has like very specific themes in this type of healing. And like, even exactly to her point of like, had we not surrendered this timeline, I can't think about like this isn't the first time that the Lord does stuff like this, right? It's all throughout the Bible, right? It's all throughout the Bible. Like, like we see like when Abraham and Sarah like tried to force a timeline. Look here, there's a long history of women forcing some timelines.
Very
You know
long
what I mean?
history. Yes.
And I have made history as part of it. You know what I mean? But like I think we could say it just doesn't work out. And so I think like what about the goodness of God where he's like, you know, you're going to blame your body. You're going to think it's not working. The doctors are going to tell you these impossible things. But like what if it's just because it's not the timeline and just because our timelines don't match up doesn't mean that like there's something wrong with you.
Mhm.
I think like this type of work, I think I possibly forget how blessed I am to see God move in the different ways that he's always teaching me. But it's just like I think it's also this like awe and wonder of like you could be doing everything right and you
Mhm.
still cannot force life to come.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's not because you're bad. It's not because the Lord doesn't favor you. It's just you were never meant to control that. That's not
Mhm.
for you to control. Like you don't operate in this sovereignty that he does. And so again, I think whenever the Lord has always been teaching me and teach my clients is that when our timelines don't wait up, how we respond directly reflects what we believe about the goodness of God.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'll just preach
Yeah.
that to myself over
Yeah.
and over and
Yeah.
over and over, right? That
Right.
when I get sour in my timeline because it's not matching up and I've submitted a
Mhm.
great proposal to the Lord, everything's mapped
Mhm.
out, and he doesn't get on board and
Right.
I turn sour, it is because there's a small part of my heart that still doesn't believe like I don't have a right alignment about his goodness,
Mhm.
right? And I
Right.
don't even know if that was even like Aaron was really like, yeah, like I want to get pregnant, but if the Lord doesn't have it, that's fine. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But and so you're like, it's not always that's not always the tripping part, but there is always this level of like surrender,
Mhm.
right? That there's I believe that like while on this earth I will never be able to fully receive from the Lord. And so it is a guarantee that I probably need to work on that.
Mhm.
I probably need to work on receiving fully everything that the Lord has.
Yeah.
And also while I'm on this earth, I'm probably not fully surrendered.
Mhm.
And so therefore I will have a lifetime of learning to surrender more or learning to surrender things that I've already thought I surrendered.
Mhm.
Right. I think a lot of times too, it's comfort, right? I love with Erin's story. I really feel like it's sometimes we feel so safe and comfort that the Lord wants to bring us out of our comfort zone to show us that we're still safe.
Yeah, that's
God, it's
good.
not the comfort that keeps you safe, right?
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
not that. And so
Yeah.
again, right? Like you can only do that in a place where you're like, no, I'm pretty good.
Right.
No, 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 Lord, like I'm really good in this. You know what I mean? So again, and it's his goodness to reveal it because he wants more for us, right? Not because we suck at it and like he's sitting here being like, ugh, you still haven't arrived.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Because if we're always comfortable, are we really trusting? Right.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, that's a
Wow.
really hard thought. to process, especially for women who enjoy control. And you've said before something, and I'm gonna not quote you correctly, so maybe I'll just let you fill this out. But like in our desire to control things, let me ask you like this: can we make things worse?
Look here. You know what the Lord has been teaching me through all this? There's control and then there's stewardship.
Okay.
You know what
Erin
I mean?
loves that. Erin, that's Erin's favorite word.
Yeah. There's control and then there's stewardship. And like I really feel like, yeah, I don't think control actually ever works out. You know what I was saying the other day? I actually think that control is of the highest delusion.
That's a good quote.
Like, like we have worked ourselves in our own reality that we are under the impression to the point where we actually believe it wholeheartedly that we control things.
Mhm.
You can't control the hair on your head. You can't control like what's going to happen in 30 seconds. And yet, like, it's so easy for us to slip into this false reality that we actually have control. You don't know the exact day you're going to start your period. You don't know, no. And like going through this journey, I feel like the Lord is like revealing it to us because they could, no matter how much you desire to restore ovulation, it's not happening unless certain things are in place. And then the Lord is like, yeah, things, you know what I mean? Like, let's move forward. Like, you can't, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And so I actually think it's like, I call it, I have to frame it as the highest level of delusion, almost to shock the system and almost be offended at it because we are so comfortable believing that we have control.
Yeah.
And I think becoming a mom, like you'll be just straight up convinced you certainly now have control. I had this one moment, postpartum, right? Thankfully, like I had a good postpartum. I actually think there's a lot spiritually going on postpartum than there is physically, but that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a show.
Yeah, that's a
I
show.
have got stories there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know what you mean. And I remember just becoming to this reality that I can't fully protect my child. Like just this raw reality, like I can't protect you from everything. Like I literally cannot. And then so I remember asking the Lord, like, Lord, like, well, why did you give me this child if I can't protect this child? And the Lord was like, I never asked you to protect it. I asked you to steward this child. I am the only one that, you know what I mean? And I think as moms, you're just like, because I think we chase this thing where like we're just this level of protection all the time. And because there's a false sense of control,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel like that's where control and protection, it's like this good motive, but like what if the Lord called me to steward my child, equipped my child?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's never called me to. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect our children, but like you will be chasing your tail and everyone else's tail if you think that you can fully protect your child,
Right.
because the raw reality is that you can't. And
Right.
I was just like, well, nothing like that to burst your control bubble, to make you realize that you've been living in this delusional land.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And that applies perfectly to body too. Right.
Oh,
And Erin, I want you to jump in here too, but it's like I can control my body. I make sure that I don't get these certain diseases by eating a certain way and exercising a certain way. I mean, it just everything you said, and you said it so beautifully, and I just my perimenopause brain it left, but it's the same thing. Like it's a delusion of control. I cannot protect my body from things. I can steward it well and do the best I can, if you will, but then that gets so fuzzy too. Oh, I hate that language. Erin, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the stewardship concept is a much healthier framework because the control it's a lie. It's a delusion completely. And we're fooling ourselves and not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not even what we want. Like the control is because we want to be safe or because we want to be loved. Like there's something under that. So it's just like this false barrier to your actual needs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the stewardship concept really, I've already felt that, Ashley, about that this child is not, it's not mine to control. It's not, you've given this child to me to care for. And that's something I've been tasked with doing, something I've been blessed with. And then I'm returning him to you. He's yours.
Yeah. Well,
And the stewardship idea that is the key there is that it's not yours.
yeah.
And part of this control thing is very mine and very pride and me. And like, that's just like, those are not the same things. Like completely having to recognize that you have something, but it's not yours. Like your body, your child.
Yeah.
It's not yours. It's God's.
Yeah. And I think those of us that come from the background we do, we are like, oh, finally free from stressing about my body. Like, and then you have a baby and it does become that now I've got something else to troubleshoot and perfect, right? I mean,
Oh,
that was
yeah.
my story. And Erin, you and I were talking about this. You know, it's like, oh, you have a sniffle? Let's test you for allergies. Let's, you know, like all the things, right? Oh, you've got a little pain. Oh, let's take you here. You know, and it does. I mean, it's convicting. For me, you know, kind of walking with Erin through this. So she's got a newborn and I'm graduating one this year. And so it's been a sweet time for us to walk together, at least for me, Erin. You know, like,
Me too.
oh, I remember that. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, that's what I did to my newborn. Now he's 18. That wasn't the best thing, but no, not that I think like that, but just recognizing like those same patterns of control. And I would say like our hearts are normally, well, the heart is deceitful of all else who can know it, right? But, like I think our intentions are I just want the best. You know, I just want to do my best. And like even that word stewardship gets so fuzzy in the church, right? Because stewardship can sometimes mean to certain people, well, to be a good steward, that means I have to be on a certain diet and I have to restrict certain foods and all those things. And it just gets messy because that's not actually what being a good steward is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other, like, we should come back and talk about that too, because
Yeah.
We should.
that's a hot one
Let's do it.
because yeah, I'm pretty sure God never told us to worship the temple, but here we are,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
yep. Yep. Well, that's a good mic drop moment for today. Ladies, this has been so helpful. Like any parting thoughts, and actually let me direct those parting thoughts. Because I know that there's an audience that's just listening because they're curious. And then there's an audience that's listening today, maybe because, man, they're about to give up hope. Like they really want to be pregnant more than anything. You know, maybe it's a younger woman who's already been told because of her history of disordered eating or eating disorder that it's not possible for her. Like, can you just offer some hope to that part of our audience today? Erin, you can go first, and then Ashley, you can close this up.
Yeah, I want to let my story and my testimony of this fertility journey at this age, you know, with this background, I wanted to bring hope to women that your body is amazing. And if you support it and take care of it, it can do amazing things naturally. I mean, I had a 1% chance according to the doctor, and God had other plans. And so I think if you can really work on your heart posture and checking to make sure you're not attached to an outcome, checking to make sure you haven't made an idol out of a healthy, lovely goal, and you can give it back to God because it's His, then you can have a really enriching journey that may result in a pregnancy, but will definitely deepen your faith and teach you to depend on the Lord for everything. And that's beautiful. And that's growth, whether there's a child on the other side or not.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Ashley, final thoughts. And maybe in this final thoughts, also how people can connect with you and what it looks like to work with you.
Yeah. I think one of the final thoughts would be, I think about stewardship is to make sure that like we are seeking God's position on this and not man's, right? And just really, as like we submit to him and get our next steps and get our directions, you know what I mean? If like the Lord has spoken to you, like, hey, you know, kids are not in the future, I would like for you to go down this other direction, then okay. But if it's fear, then, you know, it goes back to stewardship. Am I stewarding? Are my actions like lining up with fear? Because if they are, then like that's not stewardship either, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's one of those things of like, if meaning that I'm sure he is, but I'm not going to speak for the Lord. If like he's calling you into a place of healing, then like he's going to reveal, like he's going to choose to reveal things that he wants to heal, not to shame you or not to discourage you, right? And so I think it's really this pressing in of like, God, I believe that you're good. So when you reveal these things to me, when you ask me to take this action, I know it's because you want to heal me, not because you want to discourage me or throw it in my face or remind me or like traumatize me from it. You know what I mean? So I think that that's one of those things of like, if like you are losing hope, I really want to pause and be like, what is exactly speaking to you? Right? Like, let's take an inventory of what's speaking to you. You know, is your situation speaking to you, which is very real, but has God spoken about that? Have we inquired?
Yeah.
So that's where I would be, you know, when it comes to hope. And if you ever want to connect, I'm over at the HA Society on Instagram. The hasociety.com. And then if you like to specifically work with someone with a biblical background, then like you just always request, hey, I just need to work with Ashley, you know, and then like we'll kick you over to my side. So yeah.
Awesome. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
So do
Erin. Yeah, so does Erin. You got Erin's stamp of approval. Ladies, thanks so much for being on the show today. I think this was super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure to be here, Heather.
Bye,
Yeah.
guys.
Bye. And
Bye.
thanks for listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye bye.